I was downtown. I'm in Canada's largest city, Toronto. Toronto proper has about 2.5 million people. The Greater Toronto area, more than double that. And the City Hall is a massive building, obviously. And in front of it is a large town square called Nathan Phillips Square. It is just what it sounds like. It's a big square. There are sometimes festival type things out front. There's sometimes rallies or protests. It's just what you would think a town square would be like. It's not as much fun as like a Times Square or the Times Square equivalent in Toronto called Yonge and Dundas Square. It's political sometimes because it's outside the City Hall. And the reason I left to go see City Hall is because there had been an encampment there of a Canadian knockoff of the CHAZ in Seattle. Do you know what I'm talking about? The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, the Antifa stand that was set up in Seattle, a few square blocks, where the police had basically abandoned it, where gangs ran things. There was actually a warlord named Raz. Is this America or is this Mogadishu? What? In fact, I saw the other day, I don't know if you saw this, Justin, a class action by more than 50 businesses in the CHAZ suing the city for abandoning them. Can you try and poke around? I think I saw Cernovich tweeted that. So in Seattle, it's a multi-square block area that basically the government said we lack the political will to assert ourselves against Antifa. Obviously, a warlord. He doesn't have rocket-propelled grenades. He doesn't have tanks. He's a warlord. He's just a guy. Yeah, look at this. Residents and businesses sue Seattle over protest zone. Scroll a bit there. Residents and businesses in a Seattle neighborhood filed a class action lawsuit Wednesday against the city for extensive harm suffered from the Capitol Hill organized protest. They call it CHOP, like the guillotine. The plaintiffs support protesters' right to bring issues such as systemic racism and police brutality. But the occupation has caused financial hardship and disrupted daily life, said Cayo X LLP, the law firm representing the group, in a statement. 4 shootings in the area have erupted since Saturday, leaving 1 person dead. For more than 2 weeks, and with the full knowledge and participation in the city, our client's neighborhood and properties have been blocked, barricaded, occupied, and vandalized, the attorney's statement reads. Thousands of protesters have flocked to the 6-block portion of the Capitol Hill area since June 8th to demand police reform and defunding of the Seattle Police Department. The demonstration is part of a nationwide response to the death in Minneapolis police custody of George Floyd. I'll just read one more line. A lot of people have already left the area that's known as the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ. A de facto leader of the protest zone said Wednesday, 2 days after Mayor Jenny Durkin said, "It's time for people to go home." Tee-hee. The zone is deserted since the recent violence, except for a few holdouts. A CNN team reported Seattle police abandoned the East Precinct there on June 8. The plaintiffs, which include retail and other businesses, say they have had to deal with constant harassment, loss of income, property damage, and an inability to safely enter or exit their homes and businesses. Our client's lawsuit seeks to end the city's unprecedented decision to allow and endorse a private occupation of an entire neighborhood and leave it unchecked by the police, according to this statement. Unbelievable. It was mayhem. It really was a lawless dystopian place. 4 shootings and including a murder in a few blocks, and that's after what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But the thing is, it's on purpose. I mean, I used to be chummy with a police officer when I lived in Edmonton, and he liked to say, "I'm part of the biggest gang in town." Like he would say, "I'm not afraid of a gang. I'm in the biggest gang in town." I mean, he meant that in a positive way, as in he wasn't afraid of any group of ruffians because he'd just get on his horn and all of a sudden he's got a dozen cop cars if he needs them. There is no way that a warlord was ruling the CHAZ without the consent, cooperation, and surrender of the biggest gang in Seattle, which is called the Seattle Police Department. And the Seattle Police Department is not run by a warlord like CHAZ. The Seattle Police Department is run by a chief who answers to the city and the police commission, who said, yeah, let these protesters have the rule of the roost. A cynic would say it was, let them have a taste of abolish the police. You don't like the police, abolish the police, except for, as you can see, the people who live there, the people who work there, they want the police. They specifically ask for the police. They're not against anyone's freedom of the press or freedom right to protest. They're just saying, we don't want to abolish the police. Abolish it on your street, sister, not ours. So they're suing. The city's appalling in Seattle. I really have no idea what the worst mayor in America is. Sometimes I think it's Bill de Blasio in New York. Sometimes I think it's the atrocious mayor of Chicago. Maybe it's Seattle. Maybe it's LA. Maybe it's San Francisco. It's a really contested title. But here's my point about Toronto. It's such a lame knockoff. They're not occupying multi-square blocks. They didn't get a police department to abandon its precinct. They just got some tents on the plaza. I was there. There were maybe 10 tough guys, but most of them were sort of street urchins. And I can recognize people who are mentally ill. You see them on the street. They have a certain look. They have a certain disheveled nature. The way they communicate, their eye contact is a certain way. You can tell they've been outside for a long time. There are some homeless people. Naturally, if there's an outdoor protest, outdoor encampment, people who are naturally homeless will go there for the company, maybe for the chance of some food, drink, money, drugs, sex, whatever, crime, robbery. I remember when Occupy Toronto was in town, there were rapes. There were rapes in the Occupy Wall Street side, but just like Occupy, so look at this. This isn't taking over the whole area. This is a few guys literally outside City Hall. There's our reporter, Andrew. A pretty lame attempt to copycat what's going on in Seattle because we don't have the same issues down there. It's like when we had Occupy Toronto, there have been there were still thugs and violent and hitting and swearing and threatening, that's for sure, but nothing like the shootings and murder that we saw in Seattle. It's like in Occupy Wall Street. American banks really did fall, and they were they were bailed out by the United States. We didn't have the same bank failures in Canada, so how did Occupy Toronto? It didn't even make sense. Same thing here. Black Lives Matter, I've told you many times before, the slave trade was abolished in Canada in 1793. There were only 16 black people in all of Toronto that year. 16. So it's just trying to graft on an American movement in Canada. It doesn't really work. That's an excerpt from a daily live stream show that I do every day at 12 noon Eastern Time. I talk about the stories of the day, play some fun videos, and most importantly, I take your questions and comments in what YouTube calls a super chat. If you like that, please tune in live. It's way more fun that way. You can join the conversation. And every day at 8 p.m., I have a special produced show with a whole monologue, and I interview guests, and I read my fan mail and my hate mail. You can learn more about both my daily live show and the nightly premium show at rebelnews.com.